You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Hacking Humans podcast, where each week we look behind the social engineering scams, phishing schemes, and criminal exploits that are making headlines and taking a heavy toll on organizations around the world. I'm Dave Bittner, and joining me is Joe Carrigan from the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
We've got some good stories to share this week, and joining us is our very special guest, Maria Varmazis. Maria, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, very excited to have you join us today. So we're departing from our usual format just a bit. Usually Joe and I each share a story and then we have a guest. But instead, Maria will join us with a story in lieu of a guest, although I guess it's fair to say Maria is our very special guest.
Yes, I'm checking an item off my bucket list today. Do a podcast with Maria Varmazis.
That's
Check.
right. So I suspect that many of our listeners know Maria from her many appearances on the Smashing Security podcast. But then also, more important than that, she is the host of T-Minus, which is our daily space program here on the N2K network. So, Maria, glad to have you here. We will be right back with our stories after this message from our sponsor. But first, a word from our sponsors at KnowBe4. We're not talking conspiracy theory when we say it's all connected. When it comes to InfoSec tools, effective integrations can make or break your security stack. Though not as common, the same should be true for security awareness training. Not only does KnowBe4 deliver the world's largest library of security awareness training, but they also provide a way to integrate the various elements of your existing security stack to help you strengthen your organization's security culture. Stay with us, and in a few minutes, we'll hear from our sponsors at KnowBe4 about how you can integrate security awareness with your tech stack like never before. All right, we are back, and Joe, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and kick things off for us with our stories here. What do you have for us?
So this week, my story is about a man by the name of Andy Cohen, who is apparently some kind of newscaster.
Yes.
I don't know who he is. I don't watch whatever network he's on, but he was on the Today Show. I think it was this morning as we're recording this.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, he's quite famous in certain circles.
Okay.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, not in the Joe Carrigan circle.
Reality TV circles, he's very well known.
Oh,
yeah.
That's why I don't know who he is.
Yes.
I abhor reality television. Can't stand it. Anyway, this is one of those shows that's like a fishbowl. For some reason, they think it's a good idea to put the filming studio on the first floor, and always in the background, there's always someone looking in like, hey, what's going on in there?
Right.
And I don't know. I find that humorous. Anyway, Andy Cohen was on the Today Show, and he's talking about an attack that he recently experienced that began with him losing his bank card, presumably a debit card, right? And he calls his bank and reports that it's been lost. We'll put a link to the entire interview in the show notes because it's really interesting to see what happens here.
Okay.
The next day, he got an email from somebody that says that's actually a phishing email from his bank or impersonating his bank. And he goes to the phishing site and enters his bank credentials. And then they say, well, what's your Apple ID? And he's like, well, this is a scam, right?
Yeah. Good instinct. Yep.
Right. So he terminates that interaction there. Now, I don't know if at this point in time he changed his password, which is the very first thing I would have done if I realized I'd entered my password on a phishing site for my bank. However, Andy is not a cybersecurity professional. He does not live and breathe this stuff, right? It is perfectly reasonable for him to say, oh, this is a scam, and just terminate the interaction, go, whew, they almost got me. Not realizing that what's happened is they've already got him.
Yeah.
So I have empathy here for Andy. I totally get why the next thing happened, because the next day he gets a text message with somebody spoofing his bank again saying, are you trying to make this transaction on your bank card?" And he responds to the text message, "No." And as soon as he responds no to the text message, he gets a phone call, and the phone comes up, and they're spoofing. This is another scam. This is a scammer, and they're spoofing his bank's caller ID. So it looks like his bank is calling. And the person who's on the other end says, "I'm from your bank's fraud department," and starts asking him about a transaction that this fraudulent transaction, which probably doesn't exist, but then says, "Well, let's look at some other transactions we have here," and starts reading off transactions that are actually his, legitimate transactions. Probably because they have access to his bank account from the phishing attack. Successful phishing attack. Right? So once he gave them the username and password, and he didn't have multi-factor authentication enabled, they were able to log in, and they were able to convince him that they had knowledge of his bank account and convince him that they were from his bank's fraud department, and they weren't. Andy says that this person then said, "I'm going to send you some codes via text message. Read those numbers back to me for security purposes." These are codes that his bank was sending to him to authorize wire transfers. So essentially, he's getting the code sent to him. The scammer's authorizing a wire transfer from the web interface of the bank. Andy's reading the code. The scammer is entering the code and transferring the money.
Yeah. Oof.
Right. Now, at one point in time, the scammer said, "Okay, now I need you to enter these numbers into your phone." And essentially, what the scammer was having him do was enable call forwarding on his phone.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh!
You can do that
elaborate.
while you're in the midst of a phone call?
I was listening to this scam, and I was horrified to hear what was going on here.
Yeah. My God.
You're right, Maria. This is incredibly elaborate. And Andy, at one point in time in this interview, he looks at the camera and he says to the scammer, he says, "I hate you, but you are remarkably good at what you do."
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, he's a very high-profile person, so it doesn't surprise me that he would get hit with something this elaborate. But man, it's elaborate.
Yeah, it is. So now when the bank starts calling to verify that these wire transfers are legitimate, they get forwarded to the scammers, and they go, "Oh yeah, that's us. That's me. I'm Andy, and I authorized that transaction." At one point in time, he said, when he was on the phone with this scammer pretending to be from his bank's fraud department, that he said, "Yeah, yesterday I went to a website, and they not only asked for my credentials, but they also asked for my Apple ID." And this person said, "Oh no, we would never ask for your Apple ID. That's obviously a scam."
Sure.
Right?
Just to build trust with him, you know.
Exactly. That's
we're
what
the
it
good
does.
guys, actually.
Right. We're the good guys. Very convincing. Right. So, I thought this was a fantastic story in terms of what happened here. Fantastic in like the level of fraud and deceit that went on here. Huge. And I have a few things I want to say about this. Number one, Andy Cohen did the absolute right thing coming forward and making this public, going on the Today Show and talking about it.
Yes. Yes.
Because Andy Cohen isn't the only person this happens to.
Yep.
And this did not happen to Andy because he's a dummy. This happened to Andy because he was the string of transactions or the string of events lined up in his head, and everything made sense to him, and he thought he was doing the right thing, and he got scammed by a truly evil person.
Yeah.
Let's not skip that part. This person, while yes, Andy demonstrates his respect for them, these people are bad guys, right? Now, my question for number two is, anyway, I want to emphasize that. Andy, thank you for coming forward and talking about this.
100%. Yes.
Everyone
the Today Show audience is probably almost as large as ours.
You would think.
Yeah.
I mean,
maybe.
I mean,
we're going to drive some traffic to their site and give them a bump.
Sure. That
he has a huge
humans
platform of his own, too, just personally. He's very, very big. So,
right.
Yeah. He's going to be reaching a lot of people who might not normally be thinking about this stuff. So,
which is awesome that he's using that platform for this. Even in something that I guarantee you, Andy is embarrassed by this. He says as much. But I would say, don't feel embarrassed. you got victimized by somebody. I mean, if you're walking down the street and someone beats you up and takes your wallet, you don't feel embarrassed about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the cyber version of that.
Yes.
Right? It's not, you didn't fall for this because you're stupid. You fell for this because you're a human. And they hit all the right buttons for you. It just lined up. Now, I do think there's an interesting coincidence here that leads me, again, down my tinfoil hat path here, Dave.
Yeah.
Like last week. But it's interesting that this happens right after he loses his card and calls his bank and tells him that he's lost his card.
Right.
Now, Andy says this is 100% pure coincidence. If I were if I were the bank here, I'd be like, why don't we get some security analysts in here to take a look at our systems? Get some data loss prevention systems enacted and see what's going on. See if anybody is telling somebody about this or selling this information on the inside. Or if we have somebody who's just watching our traffic and finds this stuff out. I'm not 100% convinced this was coincidence. I mean, there's a good probability it was, but I'm not convinced.
I had a situation once where I called my bank about some sort of credit card issue, and I was calling the number on the back of the credit card, right? And I must have misdialed, just fat-fingered it or something.
Right.
But what answered was something that at first sounded like a legit call center for a credit card.
Right.
But there was something about it that was just off enough. Like it was a little too non-specific, like it was there to catch all of everything. And I hung up and called back and got the actual bank.
Right.
And I was like, oh, man.
Yeah, you have reached this bank. Right.
Right. So I wonder if there's a possibility of that. When he called and reported it lost, could he have misdialed and reached someone? But I think it's probably more likely, Joe, that what you're talking about, that either someone on the inside is making a couple of bucks, or there's some kind of scraping thing on one of the bank's internal computers or something like that. Looking for these things.
My money would be on insider threat. Honestly, to me, this seems way more than a coincidence. And I would bet that he has to say that because the lawsuit may be going the bank's way.
But we here fear no lawsuits.
Yeah, honestly, Andy Cohen, I know you don't know who he is, but he is a really legitimately big name. So I have no doubt that if somebody on the inside saw that name come across, the dollar signs were going through their head.
Right.
I see.
So I imagine if he was working something out with the bank, he was going, I'm going to sue you guys. I don't know. That's just conjecture. But still, to me, insider threat seems very, very, very likely.
Yeah. So how do you protect yourself on this? Never trust inbound calls. Never, never, never trust an inbound call. Someone calls you from your bank's fraud department. You say, I will call you right back and ask for your fraud department. What's your name? And then get redirected that way.
Yeah, but don't call the number that person gives you.
Don't call the number they give you. Call the bank number. Call the known good bank number, the number on the back of the card.
Right.
Or in the event that you haven't lost it, or the number that's on the website. And do not Google it.
I know. I was just going to say that.
They got me again this past week, Dave. I was I was looking for I can't remember. Maybe it was Comcast. No, it wasn't Comcast. It was somebody's customer service number.
Yeah.
And I hit the first number that came up, and somebody answered and went, customer service. And I'm like, you got me.
No.
And he goes, he knows what it's up. And he's like, yeah, I got you.
Right.
That was it. I just hung up. Now I redialed. That's not a big deal when that happens. Just know that that's what happens.
Yeah. Customer service for who? And they're like, well, who do you want it to be for?
Right. Yeah,
exactly. Right. All right. Well, very interesting. And we will have a link to that story in the show notes. Maria, what do you have for us this week?
Well, it is hard to find good help these days, they say. And companies that are reeling from a ransomware attack, they have, unfortunately, really good reason to be very, very cautious about altruistic offers for help. There was a research story out from Arctic Wolf Labs about something that I wasn't super aware of called a follow-on extortion campaign. And this was something that they had seen in October and November of this year, but they just published the research. And victims of the Royal and Akira ransomwares received emails from security researchers saying, basically, we're here to help. I don't know about you, but if I was reeling from a ransomware attack, an offer to help would sound like such a port in a storm.
Right.
Yeah. So there were two names that were being used by these security researchers that were offering help. One was called Ethical Side Group, or ESG, and the other one was X Anonymaux. I don't even know. It's not X Anonymous X. It's just S anyway. X Anonymaux.
Yeah, it's kind of like the word anonymous with an X on either end of it, kind of.
Yeah,
Kind
no
of.
S.
Yeah, it looks hackery to
Yeah, it
the
does.
layperson. It does
Yeah.
look quite hackery. So both these sets of victims received sort of similar-ish communications and claims from these supposed security researchers. And those claims include basically either offers of having the exfiltrated data in hand, so obtaining what the victim had already lost, or obtaining the data that was lost in order to delete it. So basically, you weren't able to get this data because the ransomware either took it away from you or it deleted it, and we're going to get it back for you. So again, a very, very appealing offer.
Mhm.
But the victims in this case, the red flag started to go up because in this cases where the security researcher offered to obtain the data, that victim had been told by the ransomware that their data had been just deleted locally. So that data didn't go anywhere. So there was nothing that was exfiltrated. Or in the case of server access offer from the security researcher, the ransomware had said also that the data was only encrypted. So some of these claims didn't quite make any sense. So the victims in this case that were being reached out to from these security researchers went, something's not quite right here.
Yeah, this isn't adding up.
Yeah, it's not adding up. So in other cases, again, these claims are all a little bit related. Sometimes they've got a bit of a different flavor, but sometimes the researcher would offer not only to delete the data, but also give access to the ransomware server. So I'm not sure what the plan would be there, aside from just to sort of muck around. But it sort of sounds maybe you could get revenge. I don't know what the goal would be there, but it's an offer.
Yes, now I can wreak my vengeance.
Right. It sort of sounds tempting. And again, we were talking about social proof. And in this case, the email from the researchers actually came with proof of access to the exfiltrated data. So they would include little bits to show that they actually did have access to the data that they were claiming that they had.
Interesting.
Yeah, very specific stuff, not just like, oh, here's a zip file with your company's name on it, but actually proof of something. So there was a lot behind it that gave it heft. And I guess the cherry on top of all this is that the price was a low 5 Bitcoin just to do all this for the company that had been victimized.
Oh,
So that's
5 Bitcoin. I mean, how much could that possibly be?
It depends on the day, Dave. So as of today, which may be very different when someone's listening to this, 5 Bitcoin has about a $50K value, which, it's not cheap, but it's compared to, I was curious, what were the victims of the Royal and Akira ransomware being asked? And Akira specifically, the ransom was usually $200K to $5 million. So
Wow.
compare that to $50K, it seems like just, it's practically free. So, yeah. So what seems really dastardly about this to me is especially a lot of the ransomware victims of Akira, especially, these are really small companies, about 50 to 100 employees. And I don't know about you, but in companies that small, often they're not necessarily familiar with what a security researcher might actually do.
Right.
So this might smell legitimate to somebody. They may not actually realize that this is a very blatant extortion campaign.
Yeah, this seems a lot to me like the follow-on scams that people hit, that they pile on after they've got a victim, like an individual victim, not a corporate victim. But that we've seen this where people have lost money in investment scams, and then somebody else contacts them and goes, "I can get you your money back, but I need 10 grand up front."
Yeah.
And then they just take the money and run. It seems like it's an advancement and an increase in that.
Do we know, Maria, if the organizations that were approached by these folks had paid the ransom or not?
I don't know about that. I was curious about that as well. I'm hoping when they saw the 5 Bitcoin, they maybe stopped and said, "Okay, we think this is extortion."
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know.
But
That is the question. Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is, did they pay the original ransom to, who was it, Royal and Akira ransomware groups, and then this was trying to get more from them, or Did they not pay Royal and Akira? And was this the bad guys trying to take another swing at them with a lower amount of money?
I think it's the second. And to me, I was thinking of it as sort of a terrible upsell. Like you didn't want to do the original one. Maybe you were a tiny little business and, $5 million is way, way out of your budget, but maybe $50K is something you could manage. So they're bargaining it down for you. You're still not going to get your data back. It's not going to happen, but, $50K, maybe sell you a little bit of hope. Yeah, it's terrible either way.
It is.
So the recommendation here is, I guess, don't pay the ransom.
Don't pay the ransom. And I think it if possible, it behooves people to familiarize themselves. Although this is a lot to ask of people, a legitimate security researcher would not ask of something like this. That's not how a security researcher of repute works. So
they generally don't want to be paid in Bitcoin either.
Right. I mean, I don't know, who knows, but it's that's just not how they operate. So
I'll
I
take
guess
any
maybe
Bitcoin anyone wants to send me.
like if somebody wanted to give me some, I wouldn't say no. But maybe security researchers need a PR campaign of their own. That's not how we operate. That's not legit. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Interesting. Well, we will have a link to that story in the show notes. My story this week comes from the folks over at the Hacker News, and this is about some goings-on over on YouTube. I guess before we dig in here, I'm going to ask each of you both, and I guess, Joe, I'll start with you.
Okay.
To what degree do you have any experience throughout your long, storied career and life being a person who's used computers for a long time with cracked software?
I have avoided the use of cracked software, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
I have not. I don't think I've ever I've played the demo version of games, the freely available ones, but never got a cracked version.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah. Now I will say, once there may have been one product that wasn't a game that I used that was not cracked, but was made available to me.
Okay. Obtained through other means.
Correct. But when I got it, it was rather outdated.
Okay.
But it was still very powerful.
Yeah. How about you, Maria?
I don't think I could be any more different, Joe. I think there was a good part of my life where absolutely none of the software I was using was legitimate. All of it was cracked. That computer I had was completely radioactive in terms of how it was.
All the malware on it.
Oh my gosh! But I knew that. I just kind of assumed. But I would like to say it was just because I was a poor student. Let's just go with that being the reason. But yeah, I have used a lot of cracked software in my day. I'm very familiar with the what are they called? The chiptune music that a lot of them play when you're installing them. And anyway, I have some favorites.
Back in the day on the Mac, there was an app, basically a little database that was called Cracks and Numbers, and that's exactly what it was. It was full of. Basically, it was a serial number database.
Good old days.
And so you would just look up, I want to run Adobe Photoshop, and you'd look in Cracks and Numbers, and it would have, what version are you running? And here's a username and password. And, back then, for a lot of this stuff, that's all it took to run a bit of software.
Yeah, because a license key just followed an algorithm. Yeah, key generator.
Yeah, key generators.
All right, now that I have used, and now that we're talking about this, yes, there's another one I've used.
There you go.
So now these things are starting to come back to me.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also fair to say that back in the 90s, the threat of getting malware through a cracked piece of software was much lower than it is today.
Right.
I would say these days it's pretty much 100%.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, I'm thinking all the way back to the Apple II days back in the 80s. I remember, there was always that guy who you wanted to play a copy of, Wolfenstein, the original Castle Wolfenstein or something that was, and there was always a guy who could figure out how to circumvent the copy protection that was on, the old Apple II floppy disk. So everybody knew a guy, and that was a pretty common thing. Back in my professional career, I remember there was a developer. His name was Kai Kraus, and he developed a lot of very interesting graphics software that made really interesting things. And his philosophy was, he said, I understand that not everybody can afford to pay for everything. So If you copy a piece of my software to try it out, I don't have a problem with that. But if you use it professionally, please pay for it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a pretty fair, compromise
Right.
back in the day. That if you're going to try something out, fine. But if you're going to use it professionally, you got to pay for it.
Absolutely. Yep.
All that is to say that this article from the Hacker News is about YouTube videos that are promoting cracked software. So, YouTube is, I believe, still the second most popular search engine out there, technically. Besides Google, more searches happen on YouTube than anywhere else. And I've certainly noticed that I'd say in the past decade or so, YouTube became a popular place for folks to post things like cracks and serial numbers and things like that. If you go on YouTube and search, just say, Adobe Photoshop crack, you'll get a lot of hits. And most of them lead to URLs that are up to no good. And in this case, this particular story is talking about how it's being used to distribute the Luma Stealer malware, which does exactly what it says it'll do. Once that gets installed on your computer, it looks to steal information. It's looking specifically for passwords and cryptocurrency accounts, and basically anything that it can turn around and either use or sell for a buck. And these videos on YouTube are going after kind of the usual suspects. I mean, it kind of reminds me of what you were saying, Maria. It's the student who's looking to use a high-end piece of software, can't afford to do so. So a lot of this goes after things like high-end video production tools. They talk about Vegas Pro, which is a video editing software. The Adobe suite is always a popular target
Right.
because everybody wants
that. May or may not have been one of the cracked software suites that I had. May or may not.
Right. Microsoft Office is a big one. Just basically any of these that cost a pretty penny, and they go after students, and a lot of small businesses will use this sort of software as well. Another thing that's pretty rampant is a small business will buy one copy of a piece of software and then install it on everybody's machine. So
Right.
Yes, indeed.
And of course, the providers have made that harder to do with everything being online, and so folks go looking for these sorts of cracks, and it leads to having these stealers on your machine. This article points out that you can have things like crypto miners will be installed. Just all sorts of bad things can happen. So,
Crypto miner would be the least of your concerns, right?
yeah, exactly.
That's almost quaint.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I remember years ago, and I want to say this was probably 2017 or so, there really was a line of thinking that ransomware was going to die out and crypto mining was going to be the thing, because crypto mining is kind of, and I'm going to use air quotes here, a victimless crime in that, if you're mining on somebody's computer while they're asleep, yes, technically you're stealing electricity from them, but they're probably not going to notice, right? So there's not a huge incentive for them to come after you. Whereas with ransomware, and this was back in the days of what I call nuisance ransomware, where people were looking for $50 or $25 from consumers, they thought that was going to die down, and look where we are. Just the opposite has happened, where the ransomware operators hit the big time, and it's worse than ever. So we will have a link to this story in the show notes. Of course, the bottom line here is don't use cracked software. But if you must use cracked software, don't go to YouTube to look for your cracked software.
Right.
Anybody know if the Pirate Bay is still around?
It's still around.
It's around. It's there.
Or so we've heard.
Yeah.
I haven't been recently, but
I'm a security researcher. I have to know these things.
I see. Of course.
It's legit.
Absolutely. As my friends over on Grumpy Old Geeks say, when they need something, we're going to go to Sweden and get it. We're going to go over to Sweden and
That's the way.
find a copy of that
Yo
movie.
ho ho.
But buyer beware. All right, we will have links to all of these stories in the show notes. We will be right back with our catch of the day after this short message. Back to the concept of integrations. KnowBe4's Security Coach uses standard APIs to quickly and easily integrate with your existing security products from vendors like Microsoft, CrowdStrike, Cisco, and dozens of others. Security Coach analyzes alerts your security stack generates to identify events related to any risky security behavior from your users. With this information, you can set up real-time coaching campaigns to target risky users based on those events from your network, endpoint, identity, or web security vendors. These campaigns enable you to coach your users at the moment the risky behavior occurs, with contextual security tips delivered via Microsoft Teams, Slack, or email. With 35 integrations and counting, Security Coach delivers the insight you need to improve your organization's security culture. Learn more about Security Coach at knowbe4.com/securitycoach. That's knowbe4.com/securitycoach. Joe and Maria, it is time to move on to our catch of the day.
Dave, our catch of the day comes from the facepalm community on Reddit. Never heard this one before.
Okay.
Again, I don't spend a lot of time on Reddit either. I don't know who Andy Cohen is, and I don't spend time on...
Don't get out much, do
I don't
you,
get out
Joe?
much.
You just
You're not
get
on
on the
Reddit,
internet
though?
much.
Really? Okay.
I'm on Reddit. I have a Reddit account. I just don't spend a lot of time there.
you spend time in your backyard bunker.
Right now, I
has no
spend time in my
windows.
backyard raking leaves. Still raking leaves. It's January. There's plenty of leaves to rake.
Yeah. Well, this is a screen capture, and at the very top of the screen is the logo of the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Below
So
that
official.
is a button that says "Pay with Bitcoin."
Right.
And then there are two pictures of the American flag. One rectangular picture of the American flag and one cropped down to a circle.
Yep.
That's
That's the social media American flag.
yeah.
Right.
And then
That's the American flag on LinkedIn.
right, and then for some reason, midway down, there's a picture of a Bengal tiger that is cropped to be a close up of its face, and it is growling at you. And I guess this is to put
We're
the fear
serious.
into you. Yeah, it's to trigger some kind of a fight or flight mechanism because this pops up on your phone, and not only are you scared because it's the FBI, but they're going to unleash a Bengal tiger on you if you don't do what is said here. So,
Did it play the sound when you open it? Like,
I can only hope. What's this?
it's the FBI.
Where's my Bitcoin? Okay, I'm going to read the text here. It says, your phone is locked because of violation of the American government. Your heinous crimes will be met with serious fury and punishment for the crimes of communication with enemy state like North Korea, Syria, Iran, Iraq. For punishment, 10-year forced labor, 25-year prison. Rawr!
There's the tiger.
If you want to avoid these undesire, you must pay 500 USA currency in Bitcoin, and we say nothing. We are police. We can do serious things.
This is great.
And violation is spelled violatuion or something.
Right.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Iraq, I don't know that Iraq is actually classified as an enemy state. Is it? I mean,
That's the point that we're arguing in this.
Yeah. Exactly.
I go for this. I go for the little things that should be a tip-off. It's all the tip-offs.
I don't think Bengal tigers are native to any of those countries, actually. So.
No, nor are they native to the United States.
Right.
What I would think, if I was going to put an animal in there, I would have put an eagle in there, right?
Yeah.
You know, the angry, the disapproving eagle, the eagle with looking straight at you with his eyes, slanted downward like an angry face.
Right.
Right.
Right. The eagle of shame.
The eagle of shame.
It's the same eagle that they send out, the IRS sends out in their letters when they tell you that you underpaid this year. There's
Yes.
a disapproving eagle who, oh my goodness. Well, this is a good one.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
I love it.
I guess, people pay. They had me at the Bengal tiger. That just really is the cherry on top of of this. So
there's a big button up at the top that says pay with Bitcoin, and the federal government will tell you over and over and over again they don't accept payment via Bitcoin or gift card or anything other than a check. Write them a check. That's what they want.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, this is a great catch of the day. And of course, we would love to get your catch of the days. Once again, you can email us. It's hackinghumans@n2k.com. We want to thank all of you for listening, and of course, we want to thank our sponsors at KnowBe4. They are experts at enabling a fully integrated approach to security awareness training. That is our show. We want to thank all of you for listening. Our thanks to the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute for their participation. You can learn more at isi.jhu.edu. A quick note that N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. Maria, before we go, what do people need to know about T-Minus and where can they find it?
You can find T-Minus Space Daily on all major podcast platforms and at space.n2k.com. We are the only daily space... I'm doing a bad job promoting my own show. We are the only daily space podcast for space professionals.
All right. Do check it out. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. The show is edited by Trey Hester. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie. I'm Dave Bittner.
I'm Joe Kerrigan.
Oh, and I'm Maria Vermazis.
Thanks for listening.